the occupation. You don't get to occupy Texas for 57 years, and if Texas fights back, go, oh, look at the terrorists in Texas. They started the war. No, Israel definitively started a war. America first.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Really appreciate you being here. So this one gets intense. We've got Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks going head-to-head with Batya Ungar-Sargon, Dave Smith, and Dean Cain on Piers Morgan Uncensored, and they're tackling one of the most divisive issues right now, the situation in Gaza and what the actual path forward looks like. Cenk comes in with a two-state solution proposal that immediately gets challenged, and what happens next is honestly one of the most heated exchanges I've seen on this topic. You're going to want to stick around because the Texas analogy that drops in the middle of this debate completely reframes the entire conversation. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from around the world. All right, let's get into this.
Us pay for it.
Right,
we have
so
to
who
pay
does?
for all their bills. So you can't. So then you go to the Arab countries, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and you say, "Oh my God, we got a deal. We got a two-state solution. The Palestinians are going to finally have a homeland. Now you guys pay for the rebuilding." I guarantee you that they do that. That is an easy solution. The only thing blocking that solution, and that way America doesn't pay anything. There's no more killing. There's peace. The only ones blocking that are Israel because they don't want two states. They want to steal Gaza, and now they just said it. They want
the other people,
it. They're going to steal it.
But the other people.
So there's no question about it.
Cenk, this all sounds utopian and so easy, except that, of course, you've still got a large Hamas presence, as we see with the release of all these hostages. We believe from American intelligence that for every Hamas terrorist who's been killed, they've already been replaced. The ideology may, if anything, have been fueled, and that ideology is committed to the destruction of all things Israel. So this full utopia picture
Piers,
you're painting, it bears no relation to reality.
It's not utopia. It's super simple. No. First of all, Piers, you leave it to the Palestinians. That's why I'm saying do the deal with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. You leave it to the Palestinians to drive Hamas out. So that's their internal business. But in order to do that, you have to have a deal for a two-state solution. And you make the Middle Eastern countries, the Arab countries that have always said that they want an independent Palestine, pay for rebuilding Palestine. It makes perfect sense. And if you say,
it does,
oh,
right
well,
to the point.
Work,
okay, look, you had me right to the point. You say the Palestinians.
If you go to it and say that it won't
Cenk.
work, you're going to the same talking point about how Palestinians are always going to be terrorists.
I get it.
And that's a ridiculous, racist Israeli propaganda.
No, I don't think that at all. But I think the idea that the Palestinian Authority will simply go bang and Hamas disappear, forget it. Dean Cain, let me bring you in here. You've been waiting.
It's not simple, but yeah, of course that's what you do. And they might be brutal about it, but that's
the Palestinian Authority is run
Palestinian business,
you've got a guy
not American business.
You've got a guy in his 80s running the Palestinian Authority, right? I do not entrust him, frankly, with all due respect, to run Hamas out of town. Anyway, let me bring.
I'm giving you a perfectly viable solution.
All right, it's
perfectly viable. And you're coming out with excuses because Israel wants Gaza. Be honest.
I'm not coming out with any excuses.
Can you admit that Israel clearly wants to steal Gaza? Wasn't that the whole point of this self-defense?
Let me answer you. I certainly believe there are people in Netanyahu's cabinet, Ben-Gvir, Smodrich, and others, who absolutely would like that. That's been my problem with this for a long time. Let me bring Dean Cain, who's been waiting patiently. I mean, Dean, look, a lot of people are outraged, as always, by what Trump has suggested. But is there merit to his apparent madness?
Absolutely, 100%. Look, what we're just failing to talk about here is October 7th. And I'll quote Douglas Murray here. You don't get to start a war and then complain when you lose it. And there are consequences to losing it. And Hamas needs to be absolutely driven out and ended in Gaza. That's unequivocal. Otherwise, they're going to completely keep going with the same circle, teaching people through UNRWA and this.
This is exactly what people need to hear because Cenk just laid out the solution that nobody wants to talk about. He said this, "Oh my God, we got a deal. We got a two-state solution. The Palestinians are going to finally have a homeland. Now you guys pay for the rebuilding. And you know what? That's the only realistic path forward that doesn't involve endless bloodshed. But here's the kicker. He immediately points out the only ones blocking that are Israel because they don't want two states. They want to steal Gaza. That's not speculation anymore. That's the quiet part being said out loud. And when Piers pushes back with the usual talking points about how Palestinians will always be a threat, Cenk doesn't hesitate. He calls it out directly. That's a ridiculous, racist Israeli propaganda, because that is what it is. The assumption that an entire population is inherently violent is the foundation of every oppressive system in history. Even Piers had to admit at the end, and this is important, I certainly believe there are people in the cabinet who absolutely would like that. So even the moderator acknowledges there are elements in the Israeli government who want permanent occupation. This isn't about self-defense. It never was. It's about land, and everyone knows it now.
Schooling there that Israelis are drinking your blood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're fomenting this. We're paying for half of this stuff through USAID and the other things that are going on. It's ridiculous. I think Israel has every right to step up. I think President Trump has made it clear that he's going to back them 100%, unlike this last administration. And I think we'll actually see something really happen in this area.
But the problem seems to me is there is no real evidence that Hamas have been defeated. In fact, if anything, these propaganda videos they're showing with the hostages, there seem to be a lot of Hamas and a lot of support for Hamas. For these, certainly in the early ones, and I think that would be very.
I can't believe they don't love Israel.
Well, no, but this has been my problem
After
again.
Israel
My problem again.
62,000 people there.
Yeah, but just to go back to Dean.
Wow, they don't love Israel. That's so shocking.
Well, hang on, I'm going to go back to Dean.
Yeah, would you love your oppressors? I
do
wouldn't
what
love
you
my
did on October
oppressors.
7th.
I wouldn't love people who murdered my family.
There, you sound like you sound like one of the Israelis.
You're wrong. The Palestinians didn't start this war. Israel started it with the occupation. You don't get to occupy Texas for 57 years, and if Texas fights back, go, oh, look at the terrorists in Texas. They started the war. No, Israel definitively started a war. America first. I'm tired of them. Israel first. Israel first. Give them $300 billion. Pay for their genocides. Get out of there. America first. And let these poor people, Palestinians, go.
So the
number one problem is Israel and their infinite greed for land, and slaughter.
So just to be clear,
everybody knows that.
Just to be clear, Cenk, because you're going a bit further than you have before. Just to be clear, you think October the 7th was an inevitable consequence of the way the Palestinian people have been treated?
Guys, I hate October 7th. When Hamas does violence, they do so much damage to the Palestinians and the Muslims. But two things can be true at the same time. You could have something awful, and then you could use your brain to figure out, hey, why did that happen? And does anyone think that any American wouldn't fight back if they were occupied and humiliated and their land stolen and their families bullied and harassed and humiliated for 57 straight years? Of course we would fight back. Of course any set of human beings would fight back. But when Israel oppresses them and uses their might of their giant military to crush them, that's not terrorism. But if Palestinians fight back, terrorists! It's absurd. It's propaganda. It's both terrorism.
Okay.
So yes, the Hamas doing terrorism is despicable. And when Israel does 60 times the terrorism of Hamas, we should call them what they are, a terrorist state, and we should stop funding them. Don't send our taxpayer money to go fund terrorist government of Israel.
All right.
This right here is the moment that breaks everything wide open. Cenk drops the Texas analogy, and it is perfect. He said, you don't get to occupy Texas for 57 years, and if Texas fights back, go, oh, look at the terrorists in Texas, they started the war. No, Israel definitively started a war. That analogy makes it impossible to dodge the core issue, because if Americans were occupied for 57 years, we would fight back. Every nation would. But somehow, when Palestinians resist, they're labeled as the aggressors. The hypocrisy is staggering. And then he goes even harder. Israel first. Israel first, give them $300 billion pay for their genocides. That line cuts through all the noise because it exposes the contradiction in the whole America First narrative. How is it America first when we're bankrolling destruction overseas while our own infrastructure is crumbling? And here's the stat that should wake everyone up. When Israel does 60 times the amount of harm, we should call them what they are. He finishes with this. Don't send our taxpayer money to go fund terrorist government of Israel. That's the frustration millions of Americans feel when they see their tax dollars funding endless conflict instead of healthcare, education, or housing.
Batya, your response.
I just want to talk about this idea of Israel owning the United States government, because it seems to me that people who make that argument want to have it both ways. On the one hand, we give Israel exorbitant amounts of money, And on the other hand, somehow they control us through the money that we give them. And it's never been clear to me, like, what do they use for that control? So people will say AIPAC, but AIPAC spends about $3 million on local races in America, on congressional races. It's not a lot of money.
Number one donor in this campaign cycle.
The Israel lobby
AIPAC is the number one donor. They're literally bribing
among the American people is the fact that Americans are supportive of Israel. It's like the way that the NRA was popular when it was because Americans like their guns. These lobbyists they're powerful to the extent that they reflect views that the American people already have. And I think that's a really important point to point out here, because you cannot take an unpopular view and just use money in order to push it. And nothing has proven that, like this last election cycle.
That's what the drug companies do.
Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley outspent Donald Trump 2-1. Kamala Harris outspent Donald Trump 2-1. Money in politics has been revealed to be nothing compared to the will of the American people. This is an amazing thing. I mean, as a lefty, I was really against Citizens United. And it turns out, actually, the American electorate has a very clear idea of what it wants. If you look at Donald Trump's cabinet, every single person in that cabinet, which is, by the way, the most diverse ideological cabinet in American history.
No, it's not.
They all have a very similar view of what it means to be America first. There's only one thing that they all share, and they all seem to think that having a pro-Israel point of view is very much inherent in the America First ideology, because Israel is a good ally. Israel brings a lot to the table. We get a lot more bang for our buck. In fact,
Now Batya tries to defend the influence of lobbying groups by downplaying the money involved. She said, APE spends about $3 million on local races in America on congressional races. It's not a lot of money. But that's such a misleading framing. $3 million in targeted local races is massive when you're talking about primary challenges where voter turnout is low. That money doesn't have to flip the entire electorate. It just has to scare politicians into compliance. And it works. We've seen it happen over and over again. Then she pivots to this idea. These lobbyists are powerful to the extent that they reflect views that the American people already have. But hold on. If public opinion was really driving policy, we'd see Medicare for all, student debt relief, and higher minimum wage, all of which poll incredibly well, actually become law. But we don't, because money filters which voices get heard and which policies move forward. That's the system we're living in. And then at the end she says, Israel is a good ally. Israel brings a lot to the table. We get a lot more bang for our buck. But what bang are we getting exactly? A destabilized Middle East? Decades of resentment? The erosion of international law? The argument that we benefit from this relationship ignores the long-term damage to American credibility and the moral cost of funding occupation. This isn't about being anti-anyone. It's about asking whether our foreign policy actually serves the American people or just a handful of powerful interests. And I think the answer is pretty clear. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.